Welcome to On Background, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories behind politics. I'm your host, Fred Delory, and today we're talking about what's happening on the ground in Canadian politics. Joining us is Patrick Brown, the mayor of Canada's fastest growing big city, Brampton. With a wealth of experience spanning all three levels of government, Patrick will help us explore the key municipal issues impacting Brampton and beyond. Mayor Brown, it's fun to have you on the show.
Well, Fred, great to chat with you today.
It's always fun to chat with you. It's always great to talk politics with you. And I'm really curious. I don't have a lot of experience with municipal politics. I've worked in federal and provincial. I've worked on some municipal campaigns. The stuff you're dealing with and how the federal government and the politics impacts it, I'm curious to unpack a bit. You were elected in 2018 with 44% of the vote. In the last election, you got 60% of the vote. So you've obviously earned a growth and support there, which is great to see. How do you feel being a municipal politician in terms of on the ground stuff?
So I love how connected you are to the public, and it's a wonderful opportunity. And I've got to jump into areas that I would never have expected. 6 years ago, I probably didn't know a lot about cricket. Now I'm a connoisseur of knowledge on cricket because I saw a love for it in the community that I've tried to really support. And so you get to learn every day about new things as it relates to your community. I have to say, there's a ton of exciting things happening in Brampton, and to be part of it, I've really enjoyed it. 6 years has been it just blown by.
We'll get into the politics in a second, but I'm really curious with cricket because it's a sport that I don't know a lot about, but it's probably one of the most watched sports in the world now. It's growing like crazy. I'm a sports fanatic, and I want to watch, if it's an interesting sport. What's going on in Brampton with that? You guys are building a new stadium, right?
Yeah, it's the second most watched sport in the world, and it's now Brampton has more cricket amenities than any other city in the country, and I've been proud to support that, bringing in junior cricket, lights, grass cutting equipment, and now we're building an international standard stadium. And so, I believe cricket will give other major sports in North America a run for their money. I think you're going to see cricket match the popularity of baseball in Canada, and it's an exciting transformative stage we're in right now for the sport because it's growing so fast. We're actually having the World Cup of cricket this summer. It's going to be in the U.S. and the Caribbean, and so I think there'll be a lot of eyes on the sport.
So I'm a big basketball fan. I got into football in high school, university. Is cricket fun to watch? Is it a sport that I obviously take time to get into it and learn the rules? It's not, you don't know them right away. Is it a fun sport? Those
that love cricket love it.
Okay.
Part of the criticism of cricket before was that matches could take 2 or 3 days. And the new format they have, the T20 format, is similar to a hockey or baseball game. It's a 2-hour affair, and they pack that excitement together. So I've been to some matches where literally it's down to the last bat that you find out who wins. We had the GT20 tournament this year in Brampton, and literally it was the last bowl that decided the winner.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. We should get into politics now. Obviously, you've been a real champion on major issues, auto theft. And I'm seeing that a friend of mine actually had her Jeep stolen from her driveway in a small little community, rural town, lives close to the highway, driven to Montreal and put on a ship, and it's probably in some foreign country right now. And you've been championing this, and you've been calling on the federal government to do something on this. And where are we on this right now?
Well, one of the fascinating aspects of municipal public service is that you see everything day to day. The federal government, I spent 9 years up here. It's distant from people's lives. When you're a mayor of a city, you get the feedback directly.
Yeah.
I get videos shared with me, their car being stolen, whatever the issue of the day is, you get that feedback immediately. And so, I was up here at the Auto Theft Summit. Minister LeBlanc asked me to speak, and when I spoke to the press after, they said, is the housing crisis still the biggest issue in the GTA? And I said, no. I said, it's public safety, and there's no issue that is sort of compounding public safety concerns as much as auto thefts. In the last 4 years, you've seen a 300% increase. Just this year alone, we're seeing a 430% increase in break and enters.
So what does that mean, break and enters?
Yeah, so break that down. It used to be you stole a car in the middle of the night. And you woke up in the morning, you called the police, and it was long gone, within 5 hours at the Port of Montreal. 80% of the stolen cars in Ontario go to the Port of Montreal. Now it's more brazen. Now it's not, stealing cars in the middle of the night. It is literally banging doors down in daylight and telling people, drop your keys to us or it's going to get violent. It's going to get ugly.
Amazing.
We see violent carjackings have skyrocketed, literally at gunpoint. And the reason for this is it's just so lucrative. This is the biggest gift to organized crime in Canadian history. In 2022, it was $1.2 billion in stolen cars. I'm hearing the 2023 numbers could be in the range of $2 billion. And this is
so it's bigger than like the lobster fishery.
This is funding the most heinous crime you can imagine.
Wow.
It's funding guns, drugs, terrorism, human trafficking. And organized crime sees this loophole and they're driving a truck through it. In this case, literally tens of thousands of stolen cars. And it is terrorizing Ontario and Quebec, particularly the corridor, the GTHA 401 corridor to the Port of Montreal. It is, people don't feel safe right now.
It's fascinating. Like these issues you're talking about you're impacting it, you're feeling the impact, but largely it's the federal government that needs to step in and do something, right? Like municipally, you've increased funding to police, right?
Yeah. So I've been dissecting this for a few years. We saw this trend 3 or 4 years ago of auto thefts going up and up. When we first met with the Minister of Public Safety, the previous Minister of Public Safety, we told him the concern we were seeing that cars going to the Port of Montreal. And his response at the time was, in Ottawa, we're laser focused on guns. And I remember our deputy chief of police who was in the meeting said, what do you think these stolen cars are buying? They're buying guns,
right.
Illegal guns. And so, we try to do everything we can locally. We have had the largest increase in our police budget 5 years in a row. This year, our police budget increase was 14%. I think one of the largest in the country to make sure we had as many police as possible. We've got more police officers doing patrols than ever before. We've doubled the size of our auto theft unit. We've mailed out Faraday pouches. These are signally blocking pouches to our residents.
So you put your fob key in it.
Yeah. That's one of the ways they try to steal cars now, the signal attacking method. So we've done everything we can locally, but what we're seeing is because it's so lucrative that they don't care about police. They don't care about if there's a signal blocking pouch, they'll just go in and they'll knock your door down to get the keys. And these cars are going straight to the Port of Montreal. And the reason they're going to the Port of Montreal is it's so easy to get stolen goods out of Canada. The New York Times did an article recently, and it called Toronto like a candy store for auto thieves. And when the New York Times is
so
talking,
easy.
When they're talking about Canada in that fashion, we have become a source country for auto theft. In the U.S., they scan 45% of shipping containers, and so if you're an organized crime syndicate in the U.S., if you try to smuggle cars out of the U.S., you're probably going to get caught. In Canada, it's the opposite. It is high reward, big dollars, and it's low risk. Less than 1% are scanned. And no wonder auto thefts are 10 times the rate in Canada per capita than they are in the U.S. It's sentencing, and it is our port and our intermodal hubs. A lot of Canadians don't know that our rail lines and our ports are federal jurisdiction.
Right.
So as much as we have solutions we want to put in place, municipal governments have no authority. This is entirely on the federal government. Our intermodal hubs, the rail lines to the Port of Montreal and the Port of Montreal, no one has authority to take any steps except for the federal government.
Right. And you've met with them. You mentioned you met with LeBlanc. I know you met with the Prime Minister just recently, last week or the week before on this. And you pushed on the scanner technology and how they just need to put in a number of scanners where we actually scan our cargo. Why aren't they doing this in your sense? And you have experience. Like, you're not just a municipal politician. You have experience at all levels of government, provincial and federal. What do you think the hang up here is?
So they are getting a lot of pushback from the Port of Montreal and CBSA.
Are they? But why is it? Like, are they telling the port they have to pay for it? Like, is it not?
No, and the cost of these scanners, what police tell me is that we need 4 scanners at the Port of Montreal. They're about $3.5 million each. We need a scanner at each of the intermodal hubs in the GTA. So this is not significant funds for the federal government. They need to operate them. There are a number of complications. One, there is this naive outlook at the Port of Montreal that it's not needed. They say if someone wants to look at a shipping container, they can get a warrant. A police officer can get a warrant.
You have to know then what shipping container that contains the stolen goods, though.
And so
that's ludicrous.
And sometimes the police know. Sometimes the police know what shipping containers they are because they've got tracking devices.
Right.
What is incredible is that when the police get a warrant, that takes time. And almost on every occasion when they get a warrant, it's gone. It gets moved.
It's now on.
And so obviously there is
seas.
organized crime, inside the system. And so, what our police tell us that literally it gets moved. We watch the tracking device move as soon as we put that request in. And so there are problems right now. Obviously, the system's broken in Canada when it comes to how easy it is for organized crime to get stolen cars out. We do have solutions that we put forward. And I have to say, Dominic LeBlanc has been very collaborative on this. I've been impressed by his willingness to listen. We're working on some approaches where we could work with our rail lines to have scanning before it gets to the Port of Montreal. Stay tuned for hopefully some good news that's coming soon. But I just have to say it is incredible how large this problem has grown and why there hasn't been, a greater effort to call this out. It shouldn't be international newspapers writing articles about how Canada has become a source country for stolen cars.
Yeah. Well, again, the example I led off with, like the small little village is getting hit by this. Like it's not just the big cities, right? It's little tiny rural places that are getting hit.
Well, recently there was a big splashy announcement that the Peel Police were part of. And so I've got great insights in this investigation. It was announced in Montreal the success of Project Vector. And some of the politicians from Ottawa were pointing to Project Vector as evidence they have stopped auto theft. And because our deputy chief was part of this project and because I had insights into every step of it, I can tell you Project Vector was not an indication that we've stopped auto theft. It is just the tip of the iceberg and is a vindication of what police and law enforcement leaders in the country have been saying in terms of what needs to be fixed. So Project Vector was a collaboration with local police, CBSA, to look at the Port of Montreal. And they gave our local police opportunities to go onto the port for the day. They looked at 398 shipping containers. And they got 600 stolen cars. Everyone's celebrating. We've retrieved 600 stolen cars. Here's what's going to shock you. We looked at 398 shipping containers. There's 2 million shipping containers that go out of the Port of Montreal. When you're wondering where these 30,000 cars are that got stolen from the GTHA, open more shipping containers. Our local police were asked to leave. They wore out their welcome because they had spent too long at the Port of Montreal.
Right.
And they knew which shipping routes are most vulnerable, where there's not the same type of security on the other side, at the other end of the shipping route. So they were targeted, but they told me, you gave us a few more hours, we could have found thousands more cars.
Right.
So Project Vector should be a vindication of everything law enforcement has been saying. They have been the ones pleading for scanners. They've been the ones pleading for jurisdiction. And the jurisdiction aspect is interesting. A lot of people don't realize that police do not have jurisdiction at the ports. So Montreal,
at any port.
So Montreal police can't go to the Port of Montreal. Peel Police, that's my local police force in Peel region for Brampton, Mississauga area, they can't go to the intermodal hub in Brampton. York Police can't go to the intermodal hub in Vaughan because it's federal jurisdiction. And so what I've been pushing the minister on, and I'm hopeful that, and I believe he's really open to this, is giving our local police jurisdiction, that if they have a credible lead about cars being stolen and it's going to be in this shipping container, they can go and open that shipping container. They can go on to the intermodal hub and continue their investigation. It makes no sense in Canada that local police cannot actually continue their investigation on federal jurisdiction. Law enforcement needs to be collaborative. The fact that we're in these silos shows how public safety is broken in Canada.
How does that work then? So let's say you're Brampton Police or Peel Police and you see something happening at the intermodal hub there. Who do you call? Like, is the RCMP they have to
It would be
contact?
CBSA. CBSA would have authority.
Okay.
But there's no CBSA officers right now to
there's no one
to
there.
do it. There's no one there. So
wow.
I met with the CBSA union head recently in Ottawa, and he told me they're probably short 3,000 CBSA officers, so there's no capacity to respond. And that's why when the folks at CNO tell me, you call CBSA, there's zero chance someone's coming. But what was even more shocking for me is I asked the CBSA Association, I said, tell me what you see at the Port of Montreal, because I understand you gave some pretty compelling testimony to the Public Safety Committee in Ottawa that surprised some individuals. And the response was, there are 5 full-time staff at the Port of Montreal working on exports. 5.
5. Wow.
2 million shipping containers a year. 5.
Okay.
Talk about that's the strength of border security in Canada. 5.
Okay. Well, none of this is good. Hopefully the federal government finally steps up and does something on it. But with that, I'd like to talk about some other federal issues too and how that impacts Brampton. Immigration is something. You are the largest, or sort of the fastest growing big city in Canada. And I know there's some issues as well with refugee funding in the city. How's that impacting you there?
Well, listen, immigration is part of Canada's
100%,
success story. People have come from every corner of the globe and rolled up their sleeves and worked hard in Canada. But there are some challenges right now in Canada. One area that I'd point to is, you look at the number of people claiming asylum. Our shelter system was at 300% capacity.
Right. These are people who have legitimate concerns in their home country that they're coming here.
Yeah,
right?
and they've claimed asylum. And it used to be that 2% of our shelter system was asylum claimants. We are now consistently above 70%. Canada did broaden.
How long? What 2 to 70? What? How long?
And it happened over a period of a year. It started about a year ago, and so it put shelter systems in Montreal and in Toronto at the brink. Where like in Peel, we've never had to turn anyone away from our shelter, and now we have to. Canada broadened the claims in which, and the conditions in which someone could claim asylum. So we sort of contributed to the surge. If you create an opening, obviously Canada is such a desirable place to live that it will be acted upon. But you don't want people coming to Canada for the dream of a better day being left in unsafe, very precarious conditions. And what happened was we had 5 countries from Africa. Largely, 80% of the claims are coming from 5 countries in Africa. And I remember going to the shelter in Peel, which is actually based in Dundas and Mississauga, because I heard there was a growing encampment. And I went there and I had some asylum claimants. And this was November, and they didn't have any blankets. They didn't have any jackets.
Right.
And
I just can't imagine being turned away from a shelter.
And I'm going around talking to these asylum claimants, and one person asked me, "It doesn't get colder than this." He was freezing, and this is November.
Oh boy!
And tragically, we had 2 fatalities at that shelter on Dundas. And I will give the federal government credit, though. I took this to Mark Miller, told him there was going to be a human catastrophe if we didn't get immediate help. Mark gave me his cell phone number. Said, let's work together to solve this. And we've been able to secure funding for an additional 1,000 shelter beds. Now, I've got 1 year funding, so we've avoided worst case scenarios, and Mark came through for us. What my worry is that how is this sustainable long term? We can handle the current influx. The minister assures me we're going to see a decrease in the number of claims that are coming in, but it really put cities in a precarious position because cities can't run a deficit. The federal government can run a deficit,
right, you're not
but
allowed
cities
to, right?
under law you're not allowed to. And so when your shelter system,
you're the only government in the country, right? The municipal level is the only one that can do.
So we ran last year a $68 million deficit in our shelter system in Peel.
So you got to eat into all your other projects.
Yeah, it takes out. What are you going to take it from? Policing, seniors, dental, housing, and essentially what it meant is, those that might have used the shelter system for other reasons, there was no space available, and so it compounded the homelessness problem we were facing with in Peel region. The new shelter system that we're opening up will meet the current demand, and so I'm grateful to Minister Miller on that. Credit where credit's due. He stepped up. He got hands-on and helped us solve this. But there's an example of an issue that was that was really tough for us. To see a fatality outside of your shelter system is horrifying.
For sure. And on living conditions, top issue in Canada as well is housing, other than affordability and other things. How's the housing situation in Brampton? Is there development happening at a good pace there? Is there room? Like, where are you?
So I know right now in Ottawa, what everyone talks about is housing. I feel they're a little bit removed from what's happening.
That's why I want you here to talk about this.
I hear the opposition talk about building transit-oriented housing. I hear the government talk about building transit-oriented housing. We've been doing that for the last 20 years in Canada's big cities. This is not a
There's cranes everywhere all the time.
A novel idea. Listen, we've got, I think, the fastest growth rate of a big city. We're building housing at a pretty steady clip. Interest rates I think is what hurts the market right now. Despite the fact that we have supply, we're increasing supply at a very rapid pace. Part of that inability to afford the home is contributed to by interest rates that are so high. And frankly, I'm mindful of the fact that you can't blame everything on the federal government. Interest rates are higher in every G7 country. Interest rates are high across the world.
It's a worldwide problem, no question.
And so you got the left wing blaming the right wing for interest rates in the UK. You've got the right wing blaming the left wing for interest rates in Canada. It just seems to be who's ever in power gets blamed. The same thing in the US right now, where they blame Democrats for it. I believe interest rates will come down. There are cycles, and I think that will really help with affordability when interest rates come down. And I just hope it's as soon as possible.
Right. Absolutely. As someone whose mortgage has doubled in the last few years, I agree with you. I hope they come down. How about public transit in Brampton? I know you guys are really focused on that as well. You're doing a lot of expansion with the LRT. And how's the federal and provincial governments impact?
Well, I had a good meeting with the Prime Minister about that last week. Hopefully we're going to see some good news on that front.
Are they contributing yet? Have they committed to this? Or are they
nothing publicly. But Premier Ford and the Prime Minister are both saying very positive comments to us about their commitment to this project. We have a project to extend the LRT from South Brampton to our downtown, connect it to go, so it creates regional connectivity. But it also, we've done it in a fashion to build housing along the transit corridor. So it's a transit project that is not only great for public transit, but it creates 30,000 housing units. And so, our challenge to the government was, you talk about housing, you want a housing project, I'm giving you a transit project that is directly tied to housing density, where literally you can walk down from your home and use public transit. And so this checks all the boxes. And right now, the Premier and the Prime Minister seem pretty motivated to support this project, but until I see shovels in the ground and an announcement, I'm not going to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a win-win project. So your experience, like as a mayor of a big city here, and someone who has so much experience with federal and provincial politics, so you find like you have an advantage in so many ways of understanding how those governments work too. Do you not? Like when you're communicating with these people,
I think,
you know the programs that they have and the.
I think having served at all three levels of government gives you an insight into it. And from the public's perspective, they don't care what level of government you're from.
When I ran federally in 2015, number one issue was potholes. When I ran federally, it had nothing to do with what we were running on.
And so there are some issues that I think having that insight really helps. Let me give you an example, and sort of harp on public safety, but that is the biggest issue in the GTA right now. Bail reform, a big frustration that is the justice system is a bit of a revolving door. And I'll give you an example. We had this amazing police investigation that led to the arrest in the biggest gold heist in Canadian history. It was almost like an Ocean's 11 movie. The police tracked a group. It was an inside job at Pearson Airport. $20 million of gold was stolen. Sixth largest gold heist in world history. Police do incredible work, and I got briefed on the investigation, and I couldn't believe whether it was matching the gold, whether it was surveillance of cell phones. They literally tracked this organized outfit that was melting gold for the purposes of smuggling illegal weapons into Canada. They arrested everyone. And it was so disheartening for the police that worked their hearts out on this project. Within days, we saw photos of those people arrested out on bail. There was one guy in Brampton who was released on bail who posted a photo from the gym. And so the guy arrested in the U.S. is still in custody. Those arrested in Canada are all released. And so there's a lot of talk in Ottawa about how bail is broken, but there's not one magic solution in the sense that justices of the peace are appointed provincially. So when Premier Ford says, I want to see law and order focused justices of the peace appointed, there's actually real merit to what he's saying. It's not to politicize the appointment of justices of the peace, but why are we seeing such a high number of individuals released? We had one case in Brampton, the Henderson-Bellman tragedy, where someone was released for the 5th time on bail and took the life of his former intimate partner. The Crown opposed that release, but it still happened. And so, one, I think the province has a role to play, but obviously the conditions of bail are set federally in the criminal code. And so, by being involved at all 3 levels of government, you can dissect these problems, and it gives you the insight on where you need to lobby to fix them. And so I know we're short we're short in judges, we're short in JPs, and that's affecting our judicial process. And so I need to lobby the provincial government on that.
Right.
We also need more assistance for bail monitoring that is provincial. But then I look at the threshold for bail in Canada. I met with Minister Vrani recently, and I told him, you're making changes right now when it comes to bail on guns and drugs. You're not doing anything when it comes to property crime. The reason that auto theft is a revolving door is property crime is not considered something that is serious in this country. To the point that $20 million worth of gold, because it falls into that property crime bucket, that's why they got released. If it was guns or drugs, they might still be in custody.
Unbelievable. So it almost looked like a white-collar crime then, because in
Canada, we do not consider property crime serious.
Wow, that's amazing. Because I saw that on social media, the photos of the guys walking around in the gym and stuff. That's just mind-blowing that can happen.
And I'm going to add another side of this. People get upset with the police. Like, I look at some of the commentary online, and people are upset with police. I'm thinking to myself, these police spent thousands of hours to find the people responsible and arrest them. We've got police that run towards danger when other people, would run away from danger. And because of sort of loopholes in the criminal justice system, it's creating, the public to lose confidence, and almost lose confidence in policing. And so, for me, that is one of the tragedies. I think we have some of the best when it comes to law enforcement, and there should be an appreciation, a debt of gratitude for their dedication. But people are so frustrated right now with how broken public safety is in Canada that they're upset with everyone.
For sure. That's it. People don't understand what the root of the problem is, right? Like and that seems to be the thing. And all levels need to figure out how to solve this.
Everyone has a responsibility when it comes to these solutions, because everyone can bring something different to the table. It's why when I went to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Public Safety, the Justice Minister, my starting point was, we've had the largest increase in our police budget. We've done these auto theft prevention programs. We're doing everything we can locally to step up. But this is where we need your help to solve this. And so we came with ideas and solutions rather than just criticism, but the starting point was, we're doing our part.
So when you have these conversations, do you feel the feds will pick it up and run with this, though, in the provincial government, or where's it left? Because I've worked in and around government for 20 years, both working in the Prime Minister's office, working the Leader of the Opposition's office for the party as a lobbyist. And I know it's really hard to get things moving. You got to build coalitions, like exactly what you're saying, but you got to drive it. Feels like you're driving it, but do you find there's someone else on the other side helping push it as well?
I find that the response is usually positive.
It's easy to say great idea. I agree with you, but then
generally, despite everyone comes from different political perspectives, I actually think most people are in it for the right reasons and are decent, kind, good people. And so when the responses that I've received were very positive. Yes, we want to work on this with you. What my worry is execution. Is that Ottawa moves at the pace of a snail.
Yeah,
and
that's
the executions is the challenge. I think there's all the right intentions. I think execution has been very poor, and it's why I come up to Ottawa regularly. I visit Queen's Park regularly to push the files, to push
what you need to do.
The more rapid execution. That's where I think there's a breakdown in Canada. It's on the execution component.
Right. Now, on that, going back to your political career, you've been at all 3 levels. I first met you, I don't know if you remember, 20 years ago, more than that, at the last PC convention, I think in Edmonton. You were PC Youth Federation president at the time. And you've been around and you've done stuff. You've led the provincial party. We're about to become premier until that that, I'll be very frank, bullshit story from CTV that was eventually, they had to do something that I've never seen a news organization do and admit that there were errors and that they were wrong. So that derailed that. But do you have any interest in going to another level again, or are you satisfied where you are, or is there other things?
I actually love where I am. I think in life everything happens for a reason. I love the challenge I have in Brampton right now. I got a great council. We're able to contribute locally, but also provide input to a broader conversation happening in the country on a variety of issues. I've got young kids. My daughter is 3, my son's almost 5.
You're home every night, pretty well.
I love being home every night.
That's amazing.
So, when I looked at potentially returning to federal politics, it was really hard on the family, really hard on my kids, particularly my son. He absolutely hated me being away. And so it's funny how things work out, but I love right now that I'm home every night. I don't miss dinner or breakfast unless it's a very rare occasion. I don't miss bedtime. My son is in lacrosse and hockey and soccer. My daughter's in ballet, and I got to go to their lessons. I love being part of it.
Right. And not only do you get to be mayor of Brampton, but you're still driving big city issues in terms of auto theft and
there's been a number of issues where we've been able to contribute from the platform and the microphone we get in as a big city mayor. And so, whether it's auto theft is one example, extortions, I worked with mayors in Edmonton and in Surrey to deal with how Canada can better respond to the extortion threat we were facing. A number of years ago, we led the charge on Bill 21, which was a bill in Quebec that really curtailed religious freedom.
Yeah.
And we managed to galvanize mayors across the country to fund the lawsuit against this bill that is going to the Supreme Court that I think is inconsistent with the Charter and our foundational principles. And those are examples of issues where you can contribute from the level of municipal politics.
Right. And again, you're really impacting in everyone's life at the municipal level. I'm curious, where is Bill 21 now? So it's going to the Supreme Court?
Going to the Supreme Court, and so it is...
That was a hot issue a few years ago at federal politics, right? And it's kind of dropped. I mean, dealing with like Quebec and, both the Liberals and the Conservatives are really playing very loose with
I think
their true principles
everyone
on
is offended. Everyone's worried to offend Quebec on this.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it's wrong. Telling a Sikh person they can't wear their turban if they want to be a government worker is wrong. Telling a person of Muslim faith they can't wear a hijab is wrong. People have come to Canada because we have religious freedom. So my worry is if you allow it in Quebec, it becomes a dangerous precedent that is set. If the Supreme Court rules that this is allowed in Canada, that would be a horrible precedent to be set in our country. It would curtail a foundational value, and it's why Brampton is one of many cities supporting this legal challenge.
Right. And so how soon is this coming to court?
Just recently, it's been referred now to the Supreme Court.
Okay, it's just happened, recently referred to it, so we'll be watching that. Interesting. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on, Mayor Patrick Brown. It was a fun conversation as always. Love talking politics with you. A lot of policy-heavy stuff, which I don't usually get into, but I'm always fascinated the perspective of someone like yourself on how you're dealing with politics in the federal government and how you deal with a conservative in Queen's Park and a liberal in Ottawa. So it was a fun chat.
Well, normally I'd prefer to talk about something like hockey, but these days...
You will not have that conversation with me, pal.
These days, after watching my Maple Leafs lose, the last thing I want to talk about is hockey. So I enjoyed this conversation.
Well, my New York Knicks are in the second round and up 1-0 against the Pacers, so I'm happy. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
All right, folks, thanks so much for listening in. Another fun podcast, this time with Mayor Patrick Brown, one of the most experienced politicians in this country who sees issues in his city and fights for them. It was a lot of fun. I hope you got a lot out of it. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for next week's brand new episode of On Background.